Have you ever wished for gentle guidance or a comforting word exactly when you need it most? Well, I've created my Love Lives On Oracle deck just for that purpose. Now, this isn't a deck that's about predictions, it's about connection. Every card has been thoughtfully designed to guide you through life's toughest moments, to illuminate your path, and help to remind you that you're never alone, that your loved ones are always there right beside you. So, whether you're seeking clarity, comfort, or a loving message from beyond, each card is here to speak directly to your soul. And along with the deck comes a downloadable PDF guide that you can use that will give you an affirmation for the day, something to reflect on, and even an activity to do to keep you connected to your loved one. So check out the Love Lives On Oracle deck today. You can get it at stan.store/grief to growth. Stan.store, STAN.store/grief, numeral 2, growth. Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hey there, welcome to Grief to Growth, where we explore life's biggest questions, who we are, why we're here, and how we can navigate the challenges that come our way. Whether you're a longtime listener or you're tuning in for the first time, I'm really glad you're here. I am your host, Brian Smith, and today we're diving into a powerful conversation about how to become truly unmessable with, no matter what life throws at you. My guest today is Jocelyn Herman Saccio. Jocelyn is a master coach in the art of being unmessable with, and has spent over 30 years helping people break free from the barriers to keep them from living their dreams right now, not someday. She's an entrepreneur, she's an author, a course leader, and the creator of transformative programs designed to empower people to handle anything life throws their way. In this episode, we're going to explore what it really means to be unmessable with, the number one thing that messes with most people and how you can overcome it, how to turn complaints into powerful requests. We'll talk about practical tools to prevent burnout and overwhelm. And most importantly, how you can start living your dream life today. Again, not in the future, but right now. Jocelyn is all about transformation. As you know, we are here. And I know this conversation is going to challenge the way you think about what's possible for your life. So stick around, because I think this episode could be the shift you've been waiting for. So let's dive in. I want to welcome Jocelyn Herman Saccio.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to have you here. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yes, you did. I was waiting, and you did.
Yeah. I meant to ask you before we start recording, so I got it right. It's good. I'm
Yeah.
glad. So, first of all, tell people what it means to be unmessable with.
Yeah, a lot of people, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean, because a lot of people hear it and think, oh, it's being tough or not showing your feelings or something. And that's not what it means at all. It's really about being able to stay in the space of creation and vision without getting hooked or triggered or thrown off course, by circumstances or people or situations, because most people end up being in a reaction mode versus a creation mode. And being unmessable with is being able to stay in that creation mode moment to moment to moment.
Okay. So, regardless of what's going on, being able to stay creative and being
Creative, and also, being able to act from your vision, not from your fears or your concerns or your reasons or your justifications, but actually have your vision pull forth your actions.
mm-hmm.
So you can be fulfilling on your dreams, rather than, yeah, but what if this happens? Or, second guessing, overthinking, all the things that mess with people.
Yeah. So, what prompted you to come up with this?
Well, the word, I got a sense of it back when I was like 11, actually, or 8 years old, when my parents were getting separated. My father had affairs and a kind of a high profile affair back in the 70s with Elizabeth Taylor, of all people. And my parents ended up getting separated at that time. And my mother was very much like a victim of this whole circumstance. Like she moved out to LA to support my dad's career. And then this whole thing happened.
Mm.
And she at that time did a transformative seminar, and it's not around anymore, but it was called the S training. And when she came out of that training, she was like a force of nature. It was like whatever she was creating, she could fulfill on. It was like unbelievable. I literally saw her go in one way and come out this other way.
Hmm.
And, to the point where she said to my father, I'm taking the kids back to New York. And he's like, no, you're not, not unless you get a job and an apartment in the PS6 district. And it has to be under $600 a month or something that he thought she could never accomplish. And she said, good, take the kids for 2 weeks. I'll be back. She went to New York for 2 weeks and came back and had met every one of those things. But it was like magic. She got an apartment on the last block of the PS6 district, and it was $599 a month, like just this kind of magic space. And we moved back to New York. And then a year later, my father did the same transformative seminar and they got back together.
Oh, wow.
So, and they've been together for 65 years and they're in their 90s. And it's, like if it hadn't have been for transformation, I wouldn't have the family that I have by any means. But that was like the sense of what I mean by unmessable with. And then flash forward, oh my God, this is maybe 30 years ago, 25 years ago. I was on a call with a bunch of people that were leading programs for this company that I led programs for 30 years. And the person who was leading the call said something to someone else on the call. It wasn't even directed at me, but he said, you're so messable with. And I latched onto that word and I was like, unmessable with. That's what I've been trying to put language to for all these years. So I just started creating like a world around that word, putting it in the Urban Dictionary, getting mugs and branding it and everything that I do.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a program that you've developed to help other people to become unmessable with.
Yeah, it's a methodology. I have many programs. I have courses. I have group coaching programs. I have, mastery programs. But
Mm-hmm.
the methodology is all about shifting from reacting to creating.
Okay. Okay. And so when you say creating, what does that mean?
It means, well, I'll take like an actual example. Let's say you want to start a business. I mean, I'll just use that as an example, right? And now you're afraid to start that. People are naturally afraid, what if it's too risky? I need to, have an income, I got to pay for things for my family. So those reasons usually stop people. They mess with people
Mm-hmm.
from acting on their dreams. So what I do with people is identify their vision. I architect a vision with them. So a vision is a little different than goals, but we also work on goals. And then we drive up everything that messes with them in acting on those goals and fulfilling that vision so that we can deal with those messable with moments and hack them. So they can come up with a hack to shift them from the world of reaction back over to the world of creation so that they're in action, fulfilling on their dreams and visions and goals for their life, whether it's in their business or their family or their well-being or the world, making the difference they want to make in the world. So many people get stopped. Well, who am I? How can I do it? How am I going to have the impact? Look at the rules and the politics and the da, da, da. That could stop someone from fulfilling their vision. So I get them back on track so that they can be in action.
Okay. Okay. And I know when a lot of people are going through a lot of turmoil right now. They might really feel messed with what's
Yeah.
going on around us. So how could we apply that to maybe political turmoil, for example?
Well, I had a client recently in my group coaching program who she has one political view and her entire family has a different political
Right.
view.
Right.
And it was right around Thanksgiving where they were going to get together for Thanksgiving and the election had just passed. And it doesn't even matter who had which view, right? But
Right.
she terrified about having this family get together because she's like, it's just going to be an argument and da 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 da. So I had her design a vision for this time with her family. Like, what did she really want to have the experience of being together as a family be? And she created something like, I mean, don't quote me, but it was something like, fun and togetherness, something like that, right?
Mhm.
As like an experience, as a space. So then I worked with her to create actions that she could take that would presence fun and togetherness or manifest it right then, like a game night or, coming up with an outing or a scavenger hunt or things that were, going to actually bring into existence fun and togetherness
Okay.
rather than wait for the default conversation, which would be about the election.
Right.
You know, what are you going to create to fill the space? Because if you don't create something, then the past is going to create it by default, or just people's opinions creates it by default, because that's mostly what we traffic in. I mean, if you turn on the news, it's all opinion and views, and it's not a lot of creating, it's a lot of describing and
Yeah.
booking.
Yeah.
That's a different mode. So she ended, flash forward, she had this amazing holiday, didn't even come up once, not one argument about the election. It was,
Hmm.
but she had created something to fulfill on versus hoping that it
Right.
doesn't get messed
Right.
up, which is, sort of what people resort to when you don't have tools, you resort to hope.
Yeah. Yeah. So instead of just waiting for things to happen, we are actually creating the things that we want to happen. And I think that you were
Yeah.
saying by default, I mean, people, we're not taught, how to do that.
No, I think mostly our brains are trained to react. I
Hmm.
mean, if you think about it back from like the caveman days, we had to be constantly reacting to, dinosaurs going to eat us. We've got to, react and be able to pivot and get the heck out of there. And now, although our society has evolved quite a bit, our brains really haven't evolved that much. And a conversation occurs as scary as a dinosaur, for our brain. So it's constantly ready to fight or flight or freeze. That's
Yeah.
all reaction.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I totally agree with that. I think everybody, I think, can recognize that in themselves. We have that something happens, and then there's the reflexive thing that we do, or the yeah, like kind of the reflex action that we take, as opposed to a thought out, planned process. Which I guess would by using your framework and going through some of your programs, we can learn how to get to that.
Yeah, and you can, I have on my website at giftfromjoss.com, two
Hmm.
S's, a lot of free downloads that people can use to get into this world. There's workbooks, there's videos, there's processes, there's free like challenges, 5-day challenge, things that you can use to exercise this muscle and start to see, what does it feel like? What is my experience of life as I create life, as opposed to just reacting to what life is throwing at me? And the
Hmm.
thing about the people that I work with, most of the people that I work with in my higher ticket programs are entrepreneurs and founders, and that's who can afford coaching like that, right? And they are really good at reacting.
Hmm.
So they're very effective. People who are highly effective are great reactors. That doesn't mean they're creating. It doesn't mean there's magic happening. It means they're good at putting out fires and dealing with stuff. And that's a very different muscle.
Right.
And sometimes those people take even more to kind of retrain, because they've won from being a good reactor. They've accomplished and made money and success and all the stuff that people think they want. But ultimately, those things run dry, because if you're not connected to your vision, fulfillment is missing, satisfaction is missing. And we've all known people that are extremely successful in terms of the numbers, but they're not fulfilled. They're not satisfied. There's no magic. So I like to
Right.
think I'm like a sorcerer. I bring magic back to people's lives.
Yeah, as you were describing that, it reminds me of something I took called positive intelligence, and we talk about the sages and the saboteurs. And again, and it's interesting because when we get with successful people like you're talking about, a lot of times when we say we want you to think this way, they're like, "Well, this is what got me here. This is what has made me successful." Do you run into that where people resist
Yeah.
letting go of that?
Absolutely. And it's not that they resist it. I mean, they'd like to let go of it, but they're afraid, because
Right.
uncertainty is like the devil to people. And uncertainty is actually a very high space of being able to function, because there is no real certainty. I mean, it's an illusion of certainty, as you and I
Hmm.
both know,
Right.
in life, where things happen and it's like, what the heck just happened? That was my whole future just disappeared in 2 seconds, right? I know in our past conversations we've shared some things about that we have in common, but
Right.
people think there's certainty, and that's the brain is designed to produce certainty, to predict the future by drawing on the past.
Right.
So it's actually like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when people say, well, this is what's gotten me here, I'll say, yeah, but what got you here isn't going to get you where you want to go. Otherwise, why do you have me?
Yeah.
If you want to get where you're going already, you don't need me. If you want to get someplace exponentially beyond what's predictable, that's when you hire a coach. An Olympic athlete doesn't hire a coach so that they can go run a 5K. They hire a coach so that they can perform in the Olympics.
Yeah. Well, and it's also interesting. Is I guess it depends on how we define success, because people might say I'm successful in terms of making these outward things, making money, getting promotions, whatever, but they may not be fulfilled.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't even deal with that because they're so busy getting things done and getting through this quarter or that quarter or the next meeting or the next goal. And a lot of the work that I do, especially with my mastery group, which I work with people for like a year, and these are entrepreneurs who fundamentally want to minimally double their business but have more time and freedom and
Mm,
creation in the process, because you can double your business by working twice as much, but it's much more powerful to reduce how many hours you're working and double your business, which is really more like an exponential increase, not even a double, right? And
right.
that's what I work on with people. And the biggest thing that messes with entrepreneurs is delegating and trust. They don't trust other people to, they're like, I can, it's easier if I just do it myself. It's quicker if
Mm,
I just do it myself. Like to train somebody just take too long. And it's a myth, because yes, there's going to be some training time, but then once you get that time back, it's like, are you kidding me? I
yeah.
mean, that's my biggest success with people, is when they're working less, not to do nothing, but to like fulfill on something that really matters to them, like their family or travel, or maybe a whole other project that could impact their community, but they have no time to do it and they're going to do it someday. I disappear someday from people's vocabulary.
Really? Okay. Yeah. I noticed that when I was looking at your material, you're very focused on now, things we can do immediately, right?
Yeah, because that's actually the only time that is real. There is
Yeah.
no other time other than now, except in our conversations. Like we talk about the past and we talk about the future, but in reality, we live right now. We've never
Right.
lived in the past and we've never lived in the future and we've never gotten to someday and can't find it on a calendar. And this is it. This is the only real time there is. So if you
Yeah.
can't have now be freaking awesome, then what are you doing?
Yeah, that's a great point. So how does someone, if someone's listening, how do people recognize when they're being messed with by life?
Yeah, I have them identify what I call a red flag.
Hmm.
So there's a symptom. It's like a physical symptom that happens when you're in that world of reaction. And for each person, it's distinct, but there's sort of, there's themes. Like some people, for me personally, my chest gets tight and I start to breathe a little bit more shallow. When that happens to me, I know I am reacting. And I don't
Mm,
even have to know what I'm reacting to. I know that when I'm in that state, something's going on. So if you can identify the symptom, like just look for yourself, what happens for you physically in your body when you're either in survival mode or reacting or afraid or, angry or irritated, any kind of reaction that's automatic like that.
yeah, and I know I can relate to that. It's if I get upset, I can feel it like kind of similar, I guess what you were saying, like in my chest or and that quickening of your breath is it's that I think it's the fight or flight thing kicking in. It's a
Exactly.
physiological response that we have.
That's exactly it. So people, if they can identify what their physiological expression of that fight or flight reaction is, sometimes it's a flushed face, sometimes it's a pit in your stomach,
Hmm.
whatever it is, tightness in your neck, then you can use that as a red flag. Oh, I am going down that road right now. So I got to now hack that. That's what you hack. You hack the physiological reaction, because that is happening physically in your brain. What's happening is your amygdala is firing, which is
Right.
this back part of your brain, and it sends you into fight, flight, freeze kind of mode. And you have to interrupt physically where your brain is functioning from. So there's some very simple hacks. I really invite people to create a hack that they can, practice themselves. But the simplest one is a breath hack, where you can just breathe in for 3 and breathe out for 6. And
Mm,
that sort of resets you to like a neutral or a nothing position. The problem with that, if you just do that, it's not sufficient, because the muscle memory is to pull you into that world of reaction. So if you just get to neutral, you're going to be sucked right back down that road in the next nanosecond. So what I do that's beyond just that moment of relief, which most people talk about. I mean, a lot of the thought leaders are like, oh, and then you can just, get to that moment of, relief. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't help ultimately the next moment, because then you're back in it. So what we do is have you pre-create a vision for that situation, that relationship, that life, so that it's there as another road to go down. So you get to neutral, but now you're going to go down that road like my client did with fun and togetherness. So if she got hooked about some political thing, she could do her hack. Her hack, I think, was shaking her hands. And she got back to nothing. And then she went to her fun and togetherness and took an action that would put her on that road of fun and togetherness, would express it, would presence it right now, not
Yeah.
someday, not next week, not once they're gone, but in that moment, so that she's living the vision, living the dream right then.
Wow. Okay. That sounds great.
Yeah,
And
it's great,
so,
but it takes practice.
yeah, well, yeah, again, it does. It does take practice, and I've been doing something, I guess, similar, and it does become more natural, I guess, after you do it for a while. But it takes a while, and the first thing you have to do is catch yourself going into that mode. I think
Yeah.
that's the problem that most people have. They're not cognizant enough of their own thoughts or their own thought processes to catch themselves falling down that trap.
That's why I don't make it about thoughts. It's the physical, the chest thing or the
Hmm.
face thing, because you're going to see or feel that
Hmm.
way before your brain recognizes some rationale for it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it happens before your, oh, I'm second guessing myself conversation. No, you're tense here. You're going down that road. It doesn't matter what the explanation is for it. It's
Okay.
just you're about to go down the left road. Get back to the center and go down the right road.
Yeah.
Not right like right or wrong, but the
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, how do limiting beliefs come into play with things that mess with us?
That's a big thing that messes with people. I mean, I'll just share from my own life. When I was little, when I was like 4 or 5, all I wanted to do was be a singer. And then at like 5, I remember I was having a conversation with my dad in our car, and he was a painter. He painted the painting behind me for those of you that are watching this instead of listening.
Hmm.
And he had stopped painting. He wasn't like painting as much. And I said to him, why did you stop painting? This is at 5, right? And he just says kind of casually, well, you can't do your art as your career. Now,
Hmm.
it's not like he was trying to kill my dream, but for him, that was the truth, right? And at 5, you know, that seemed logical. So it wasn't that he said it, but I said to myself, you can't do your art as your career. And that became the truth.
Yeah.
So that became what we would call a limiting belief. And I believed it, and I found evidence for it. Look at all my friends that were actors, that were starving actors. I didn't want to be a starving actor. You can't do your art as your career. Now, I didn't see all the evidence for all the people that were doing their art as their career, because it didn't fit my narrative or my belief. And it becomes like a lens that you're looking at life through. So
Yeah.
flash forward to, I was in my very early 20s, and I was in a transformative workshop, and somebody was saying something, and I all of a sudden realized, wait a minute, what if that's not the truth? What if that's just something I said at like 5, in the infinite wisdom of 5, and got stuck with? And it loosened its grip on me. And within 3 weeks, I had a record deal. And that
Oh,
record went
wow.
number 1, in the country. So that's how powerful our beliefs are. They can stop us and they can free us when you
Yeah.
identify them. And that's really the job of a good coach, is to have you see your blind spots, those things that are limiting you that you don't even realize you're being limited by. You just think it's the truth.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm testing out a new feature. I'd love to get your feedback on it. It's called Fan Mail, and you can send me a message right from the show notes of the podcast. So look for the link that says send me a text. You can ask a question for a future podcast. You can suggest a guest or just give me any feedback you want. Just remember, it is one way. I can't text you back, and I will not have your name, your email address, or your phone number unless you include it in the message. Let me know what you think. Yeah, as you were saying that, I was thinking about when I was a kid, my parents, it's really weird. I didn't realize until I was in my 20s or 30s, I guess. In our family, it's like you never wanted to own your own business. And I met a friend when I was, I guess I was in my mid 20s, and he owned his own business. But his whole culture was like about, being an entrepreneur.
Right.
And I always felt like I had that entrepreneurial spirit, but I remember talking to my parents and like, oh no, you never want to own your own business. Your uncle and aunt had a restaurant and they worked themselves to death and they never made much money. And I realized when I didn't know the word limiting belief at the time, but I was like, that's the belief that had been passed down through my family. And
Totally.
only way I ever started my own business was because I met someone who had his own business and was doing it, and I saw that it was possible. But
And
I-
that's what happens for people. They don't question it because it came from your family or society
yeah,
or whatever, or the TV shows you watched when you were a kid. That's what a family looked like. That's what a marriage looked like. And that becomes, your pictures also become limiting beliefs. Even if they're good pictures,
mm,
they limit what's possible because not anything is possible, just some things that fit in that picture. So whether it's with regard to money, I mean that messes with people a lot, their beliefs about money, their mindset about money. It's not so much the number of dollars, it's their relationship to money, you
hmm
know, to communication in their relationships, to their children. I mean, people get messed with by all sorts of things.
yeah,
You can imagine it's just everything basically. They get messed with by people's opinions, by their own opinion, by self-doubt, by fear, by money, by time. Time messes with people all the time. They're like, I don't have enough time. I'm overwhelmed. Overwhelm is not a real thing. You have exactly the amount of time you have. There's no enough time. And if you're not scheduling yourself in a way that's related to reality, like, you're double booking yourself and you're not putting things in your calendar, then you're going to be overwhelmed because you're not dealing with the reality of what there is to do today or
hmm
tomorrow or, whatever. So I do a whole calendar workshop. It's called Design Your Days because I found it was just insane how much that messed with people. And, it's like $19 or something on my website. Is very, inexpensive, but it's an hour to train somebody how to relate to what there is to do as opposed to get overwhelmed by it or burnt out.
yeah. So that I think that well, you touched on a couple. I think that a lot of people can relate to. I think time and money. We have
Huge.
beliefs around that, and I hear people say there's not enough time, but then it's just like you said. I see that they double book. They're always trying to squeeze one more thing in, and I also
They
find
don't
people.
schedule travel time. They don't schedule in between time, in between meetings. They don't schedule showering. They don't schedule eating. They don't. I mean, I schedule everything, including when I want to be intimate with my husband. I'll put that right on the calendar and I'll invite him to that occasion. I'll be like, in-house session. That's what that's called.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned that because for a long time I've realized that, or it took me a long time to realize that things that we want to do that we don't put on the calendar get squeezed out. So people
Yep.
will say like, I don't have time to exercise or I don't have time to meditate because everything that's urgent gets scheduled and things that are, oh, I can meditate tomorrow or I can work out tomorrow. And then tomorrow, as you were saying earlier, tomorrow never comes.
Yeah. Well, tomorrow might come, but someday never comes.
Right.
Like you can schedule something tomorrow. Like I can
Right.
put
Well, yeah,
this,
right,
like
right, right.
meet with Brian tomorrow at 2 o'clock, but I can't schedule meet with Brian someday.
Right.
Like where am I going to put that? It's just not a real thing. And
Yeah.
I would like to be around. If someday is real, I'd like to be around when it comes because a lot of stuff is going to happen on that day. It's going to be
Yeah.
quite a day,
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about time. Let's talk about money and limiting beliefs around money. What have you experienced and how do you help people with that?
I work a lot in the realm of money, not only in business, because obviously business has money metrics, depending on what kind of business you're in. But my
Hmm
clients, when we do a plan, we do a year out or 5 years out, but we do definitely a year out. And then we do milestones with regard to revenue or profit margin or whatever it is that they're tracking, clients, new clients, whatever. So we do a backwards plan for the year and then I manage from that. So every time I meet with them, we're looking at, okay, so where are we? Are we on track? If we're not, what's the source of the breakdown? So if we
mm
said we were going to do $10,000 this month and we did 4,000, we need to know what we did or didn't do that resulted in 4 on 10. And most people don't debrief that. Or if we did 12,000, okay, what was the source of that 12,000? That's a breakthrough.
Right.
Let's see what were the actions that allowed for now let's do more of those actions. And stop doing the actions that aren't producing the results. So we do a lot of debriefing so that people get to the reality about money. But the first thing about people's money mindset most people don't even know how much money they have. They're literally in a fog about their money. They're like, I don't have enough, or I have enough, or I'll always be able to make more. They have some story about their money story, that kind of runs them, rather than I have this much, I owe this much, I earn this much, like getting the reality. So I have them first just do a reality check on all their money. What do they have? In what accounts? What
Hmm.
interest rate is it, earning in that CD or in that IRA or blah, 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 whatever. Get really clear about what's then get really clear about what you're spending. So you do, like if you were going to go on a new food plan, you'd audit your diet, you audit your money and look at, okay, what am I spending money on? My God, I'm spending, $200 a week on lattes. That's insane. Like you can actually do something about something that you are related to the reality of. You can't do anything about things that you're not related to the reality of, just like your weight. If you don't know how much you weigh, how are you going to impact your weight? It's like, well, I feel thinner. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's like you've got to know what the reality is. So I have them do like an audit on their money, not an audit like the IRS, but an audit on what they're spending and what they're making. What are all the sources of income, including dividends or interest if they do have stocks, including interest on their savings account or whatever, because people don't count that stuff. They don't actually deal with what's coming in and what's going out. And then we have to see if there's a gap, because if you're spending more than you're making or that you're generating, you either have to generate more or spend less. I mean, this is not brain science, but
Right.
in a way it is, because your brain, when it isn't related to reality, comes up with all sorts of disempowering relationships. So as long as I can see a reality of something, I can see a way to impact it in whatever way somebody wants to impact it.
Yeah. So without betraying client confidentiality, can you give us an example of someone you've helped become unmessable
Oh,
with?
totally. Yeah. I mean, I have a client. I mean, she's not secret. She does testimonials for me and everything, but she went from, I started working with her. She was doing about 300,000 a year in her law practice. That first year, she went to $1 million a year. Then in the second year, which we just finished, she's at over 2 million, and she's on track this year to do 5 million. And she used to work 24/7, like 7 days a week. I mean, it's her firm. And
Hmm.
now she stops work at 6 and does not work on the weekends. So
Wow.
it's like, to me, that's like I can die happy. I mean, look at and the difference she's making in the area of family law and supporting people with their custody battles and their divorces and making them, less dramatic and less costly. It's a
Hmm.
huge impact. So I mean, that's just one example. I have a doctor who has a clinic that she started in Kansas, and when she first started working with me in my mastery program, she was bleeding money and had like 2 clients or something, 2 patients, and then she 17x her clients base in the year, in less than a year actually, and 8x her revenue. And I mean, it just, and she's having fun,
Yeah.
and looking at what else she wants to create. Now she's talking about building a hospital, not just a clinic, but a hospital. I have
Wow.
clients that were partners. They started a business in the beginning of our master, and they were both one-on-one clients before, but then I moved them into the mastery program, because I think when people are in a group of high performance people, they get more quicker. It like has that group dynamic. And they figured they might break even by the end of the year. Within 3 months, they were profitable, and they've been just killing it ever since. So those are the kinds of like specific measurable results that
Right.
people produce.
So those are the results. Tell me a little bit about how you get there. It sounds great. If I'm going to
Yeah,
triple,
right.
double my business, what kind of things are we doing?
Well, in that program specifically, what I focus on is mastering performance, which is actions and inactions,
Hmm.
and creation, shifting from reaction to creation, and freedom.
Mm.
So a lot of people, they might have a successful business, but they're a prisoner of their own business, prisoner of your own creation. So that's the three-pronged context in which I work with people. So we come up with goals and a plan, and then what gets unearthed is everything that messes with them, whether it's with their relationship to money, like thinking that only a certain amount of money is possible, or spending willy-nilly, whatever that means, or whether it's their relationship to delegation or hiring people, like spending money. Like, I had this client who had like this thing that she started, but she was the one who answered the phones, and I was like, you can't answer the phones anymore. You have to hire somebody to answer the phones. I can't trust anybody to answer. I mean, it was like this whole thing. It was not about answering the phones. It was like her breaking the addiction of having to be the one to answer the phones.
Yeah.
Finally, when we broke it, their business, went up even more. And, so people have to see, it's like having scaffolding around you so that you don't just free fall. Having a coach and a supportive group is like having scaffolding. So you can take the kind of risks that you wouldn't normally take on your own because your thinking doesn't allow it. But when you're in a group of people that are all sort of taking those same kind of risks and breaking the same kind of addictions,
Yeah.
then, gets a little bit at least more doable.
Yeah. We've talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to kind of go over it again. So, if people are in a situation, a job situation where they feel stuck, it's like I've been here for 20 years. This is all I've ever done. It's all I know how to do. Um, how do we break free of that?
Well, the first thing I do with people, no matter what their situation, but in this situation, I would do the same thing, is I would find out what their vision is because most people stop having a vision. They're just looking down and in, dealing with what's there, another week, another dollar, another day, whatever. But your
Hmm.
vision is where you look up and out. Like, what am I really creating for my life? Like in 5 years from now, what do I want the experience of life to be?
Okay.
So it's more like in the realm of things like joy or self expression or freedom or adventure. It's spatial. It's not goal oriented. It's more of a spatial thing.
Hmm.
So if what you're creating is, appreciation and adventure, that's what you want the quality of your life to be, then we start architecting how are we going to fulfill on that in many different vehicles, whether it's at your job or in your family or with playing pickleball or whatever it is that really, can light you up and start to express those qualities and create that space for your life. Because when people feel stuck, it's mostly that they just don't have a future that they're living into. They're just living out the past over and over, like a better version or more this or maybe a little less this, but it's not really the kind of open, expansive future that was there when they first started their career.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
magic that was there. And magic disappears really easily because there's no magic in management. And when you start to build a career, at some point you're managing it and making it survive, which puts you in survival mode. So that stuckness is very common. So I get people unstuck by first unlocking and architecting a vision with them so that they have another place to look up from versus always looking down and dealing like bullets coming at you.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds great. So, I know you talk about turning complaints into powerful requests. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, I used to be the president of the board of directors for my co-op in New York, and people had complaints all the time. I mean, they would just come to me with complaints. I'd be in the elevator, they're complaining about the furniture and the lobby. I mean, it's just everybody complains about something. But
Hmm.
people complain only because they're committed to something. It's just the complaint sort of is the first thing they lead with. So they don't lead with like, I'm really committed to the beauty of our building. So I have a request that we have colored flowers in the entryway. They
Hmm.
say those flowers are ugly. They give you a complaint. So how you can start to be a really great leader is to listen for what's the commitment behind the complaint. And if you have a complaint, just make a pact. I'm not complaining anymore. I'm only going to make requests. So instead of, you never give me back rubs to your husband or your wife, I request you give me a 20-minute back rub tonight.
Hmm.
It takes it from blah, blah, blah to an action conversation, something that could create a future that is bigger than the one you're living into. If you're
Yeah.
complaining, it's like a down and in, it's a descriptive kind of like, you don't do this and you should be better at this and da 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 da. What can somebody do with that? Nothing.
Yeah. Well, as you said that, my first thought was then that's when people get defensive, right? Yeah, well, what do you mean I never do this?
Yeah,
And and
exactly.
then and
I
then you're
gave
in
you,
that mode.
yeah,
Yeah.
1978, I gave you a back rub and then you start being right and it's craziness. So you're setting up them reacting to your reaction, and then it's like a dark circle that just goes down, right? But if you're operating from making requests, now people always have the option to say no to a request,
Sure.
like I'd like to, but I'm really tired. That's like more of like I'd like to, but so a yes, but. And I
Hmm.
train people what to do with yeses, with nos, with yes, but, because people are weird when it comes to making requests. They're really bad at it. They'll say things like, I really need a raise. That's not even a request. It's like, I request a 10% raise by March 1st. That's a request. But people don't speak that way. They're not straight talkers.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a really good point. I'd never really thought of it that way before, but this is a more of an interpersonal thing to communicate better with people. Again, take them out of the defensive mode, give them something to do, to
Yeah,
either
to
again,
say
like you
yes or
said,
no to, or yes,
yeah,
but yeah.
yeah. So that actually creates a much more dynamic for possible success as opposed to you never do this. So that's one I will take with me. I like that a lot. It's something we could
Yeah.
start doing today. So I was going to ask you for like what's one thing people can do today? That's one. Do you have another one?
Sure. I mean, one thing you can do is start scheduling things that you do every day in your actual calendar or that you want to do every day. So, like you said, meditation. If you don't put that in your calendar, the chances of it happening are so much less, or exercise, and I wouldn't just say exercise. I would say, what are you creating with your exercise? Is it vitality? So, creating vitality, treadmill, creating intimacy, date night, creating peace of mind, meditation. So you have not just what you're doing, but the context in which you're doing it in your
Hmm.
calendar. And you can really, do that immediately and start to notice the difference in your relationship to your life, because your life fundamentally lives on your calendar.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there. I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near-death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near-death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe that NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.griefthe2growth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, I was telling you, I've been trying to do that, and I've been recommending it to my clients for a long time. Like, put things you want on your calendar, and I started doing it, but then I realized, like say it's meditation, it's really easy to put it on there, and then if I don't get to it at 10 when I put it on my calendar because I've got this thing to do, then it gets bumped. So I just found a tool. I love AI. So I just found a tool that actually you can put things in your calendar, and if they're not done at that particular moment, it keeps rolling them over until you get them done. So that's been really, I've been doing this since like November, and it's great. And like you said, I
Oh, it
put
makes such a difference.
I
Yeah,
put
for sure.
everything like my meditation, my morning walk, my water, my plants, anything that I want to do on a regular basis, my social media stuff. I was really, really bad about like getting social media done, making a post to Facebook or doing something on Instagram. But now that it's on my calendar and I can say I want to do this 3 days a week, I'm much, much more consistent with that.
Yeah. And then ultimately, your relationship to what's on your calendar has to do with your relationship to your word, which is what all my work is about. Being unmessable with is really having your word be unmessable with. So
Yeah.
when you say something, it happens. And, when we negotiate with our word is weak.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I said I'd do 100 sit-ups, 90's enough, and we start justifying and all that stuff. So the more you can empower your word, and it doesn't really matter what you give your word to, whether it's taking out the garbage or being faithful to your spouse, it's your word that you're honoring, not the thing you gave your word to, because that's
Mm-hmm.
too easy to justify. Like, I don't have to meditate today. I did it yesterday. Da da da. You can talk yourself out of you
Right.
know, your word. But if you have it be like the word is the thing, then it doesn't really matter what you're attaching the word to. The more you say X and do X, the more power your word will have, which then triple my business is simple if your word has that kind of power.
That's a really interesting point. And, I think when we think about our word, we think about our word to other people. We don't really think about our word to ourselves, to what we've committed to. And, if you promise someone else that you're going to do something and you don't do it, they're going to let you know. But
Or
it's really,
or covertly they will. Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
But with ourselves, it's as you said, it's really easy to let ourselves off the hook. Yeah, I said I was going to do that, but again, if you don't write it down and you don't actually make it a tangible thing, then it's really easy to just back out of it.
And it still is easy because you negotiate with yourself. I mean, that's one of the
Sure.
things I like to kill with people is just like stop negotiating with your own word because every time you say X and do X, whether it's taking the garbage out at 7, not 7:01, but or doing the 100 sit-ups or whatever it is, your word gets stronger. So if you identify as your word, so that's how I identify as my word. Who I am is my word. So
Hmm.
whatever I say is who I am, and I can be counted on that for that. And that's actually the ancient Aramaic word abracadabra is I create as I speak. That's what
Hmm.
abracadabra means. So, when I talk about magic, it's all about word. So if you identify as your bank account, then your bank account's going to have power in your life. If you identify as your feelings, then how you feel is, I don't feel like working out, then that's going to have power. If you identify as your past, then what you did or didn't do is going to have power. But if you identify as your word, it's the only thing that you have 100% dominion over. Everything else is a crapshoot. You feel how you feel. You don't really have a lot of control over how you feel. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad, whatever. Sometimes you feel like working out, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you want to be married, sometimes you don't, whatever. But your word is the only thing that you are 100% at source of.
Hmm.
So if every time you say X, you do X, that gets more and more muscle, so that you could say intimacy in my marriage and it happens. It's like you could say chair and a chair would fall out of your mouth. That's how much power you're giving your word. So I look at it as not so much like keeping my word to myself. It's building the muscle of my word so that I can create anything.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. That's my favorite conversation is about word. Your word is your wand, is how I
Yeah.
put it.
So, can you share a story of when you had to apply your own teachings to yourself?
Oh my God, so many. Well, the singing thing is definitely one of them, but I'll
Hmm.
just do like a recent one. Um, I was, wanted to do a podcast. I just launched my podcast like I don't know, 8 months, 7 months ago or something like that, and we just hit number 32 on the self-development education charts on Apple Charts last week, which
Wow.
is kind of exciting, right? But at the time, I had a lot of reasons why it wasn't a good time to do the podcast. I was like, first of all, I don't even know how to do a podcast. So that's one thing. Like, I don't know how to do it. It sounds confusing. I don't know what an RSS feed is. I don't know what all these things. It's going to be, I'm going to need all sorts of equipment. And, then it's going to take so much time. And I had all the reasons, the time, the money, all the stuff that messes with
Hmm.
you. And I
Right.
heard myself.
Hmm.
I heard myself talking and my chest was getting tight. And I was like, okay, hang on a second. I did my little hack to get to nothing. I said, okay, what am I creating? Like, why do I even want to have a podcast? Like, why am I even doing this? And I really looked at the impact I wanted to have. And I wanted to reach a lot of people and give them the tools to be unmessable with. I really want to make that difference. Contribution is one of the aspects of my vision. So I started looking at, okay, so what actions would I have to take if I were going to do this podcast thing? And
Right.
I came up with a backwards plan. And this was like in February, it was like a year ago. And I said, okay, if I want to launch it in June and I want to have 40 episodes recorded before I launch it, how many would I have to record each week? And so I started scheduling, slots. And then I made a list of 50 people to ask if they wanted to be on it and started filling those slots. I mean, I just started being in action on the dream. And then on June 6th, we launched it. And I have episodes recorded through October of the year because I just kept doing that. So I just kept
Mm-hmm.
staying in action. And now I'm not in survival about it because I don't have to record an episode this week in order to release next week because I've got such a runway because I was able to do that backwards planning. But it took me getting out of my own way. And, when you don't know how to do something, somebody who does. So
Yeah.
ask them. And I just started asking people, like, how do you do this? And it was so much easier that I made it in my head. I thought it was going to be this whole thing, and it was really nothing. It was easy.
Yeah.
So that was an
Yeah.
example.
That is a great example, and just as you said, setting that goal and then breaking it down into actionable steps, and realizing that, yeah, a lot of things we think are so much harder than they are. I remember when I started, when I launched my podcast, it was the same thing. There's a seems like there's a lot of steps and stuff, but then there are people that will help you do that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Get
yeah,
somebody to edit it. And, or there's programs that do it if you don't have, a budget for a team or whatever. But everything is doable if you're in the world of creation. If you're in
Mhm.
the world of reasons and considerations, then you see why something isn't possible.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You can either see why it's possible or why it's not possible, and setting up or looking at what the obstacles are. They're realistically like I need to understand what an RSS feed is, and I'm going to need a microphone and stuff like that. But these are all, as you said, very doable things.
Yeah, it's like Amazon, click. Okay, tomorrow I'll have a mic. I mean, these are not like big complex, business plans or like, how are you going to monetize? Don't worry about all that.
Right.
Just start, just put one foot in front of the other, like they used to say in that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer holiday stop motion thing. It's
Right.
like one
Right.
foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking out the door. Period.
I've seen so many times people, like Substacks is a new thing for me. I've been on Substack for a couple of months now. And people are like, I want to get on it, but I need to study it first. I need to take 6 months to figure out what to publish and how to publish it. And I'm like, there's zero risk. It's free. Just go ahead and set it
And
up.
write something,
And write something, right? Even if nobody reads it, that's okay. But
nobody will read it unless you invite them to it. So I mean, it's so low risk. It's kind of a joke. It's like when people go, I don't know, I want to have the right social media. I was like, how many people are following you? Who cares? Just post something.
yeah,
What is it, like 6 people are gonna be upset, or 200 people are gonna what? They're gonna write something like you suck? No, they're not. They're just it's gonna be their eyewash of their scroll.
yeah, but that's those are the things that stop us. And like I said, I see this so often with people. Like I've talked to so many people. I do want to have a podcast someday.
Yeah.
I do. I am going to start writing on Substack someday. I'm going to do a newsletter, someday. And then once they get it, they're like, well, I don't know what to post. I'm like, post anything. Just first of all, if you got no followers, nobody's going to see it. So
Exactly. It's
just
just like, what are you worried about? And even if you do have followers, it's like, what are you afraid of? You're afraid they're going to do what? Say, I don't like this post. Okay, delete the post. You're in control of the feed. I mean, it's not like, it's just you're not posting naked photos of yourself, you're just posting stuff. This is not brain science. But people do get scared and they do get stopped. And so it is important to have, an environment of people that are supporting you and encouraging you to take the actions when you can't. I mean, I had a someday dream of moving to France since I was 16. I was like, someday I'm going to live in Paris, someday, blah, blah, blah. And then I was leading one of my courses called the Foundation for Being Unmessable with. It's like a 6-week pre-recorded course. This was when I was actually recording it and
mhm.
leading it live. And I was talking about there's no someday, there's no such day, blah, blah, blah. And I get off the Zoom call and I realized I was like, there's no someday, except I keep saying I'm someday going to move to France. Like,
Hmm.
what is that about? And then I turned to my husband. I said, all right, when are we going to do it? I don't care when it is. If it's 5 years from now, it's 5 years, but let's set a date. So we're taking someday out of the thing. And he said, how about in 6 months? I was like, okay, game on. And we set the date, and then everything started to fall into place. We went for the weekend, we found an apartment, we applied for visas, I mean, everything, and we were there within 6 months.
Oh wow. Wow.
So
That's
we live
that's a
part time there,
really
part time here.
yeah, that's a really powerful story because as long as it's someday, as you said, it's not going to happen. But when you set the date, it's either, then you start making plans and you start taking actions, but you're never going to take action until you have something concrete to take action against.
Yeah, it's that quote. I think it's a George Bernard Shaw. I won't be able to quote it, but it's something like, "Until one is committed, there's always hesitancy, a chance to draw back, ineffectiveness." Yeah, until you buy the airline ticket, you're not going to France. It's like it's a nice conversation, but until you set the date for your wedding, you're talking about getting married. You're not getting married.
Yeah.
You're engaged in the question of marriage until you have a date. And then you're getting married in reality. you
Yeah,
know
it's funny as you're saying that. I was thinking about so many friends that we have, and you'll talk to them. It's been 6 months since you've talked, or a year or whatever, and I'll say, you know what, we need to get together and have lunch someday.
hmm
And every time that happens, I'm like, this is not going to happen. We
Yeah,
both know it's not going to happen. We just both say it.
it's true. And it's the conspiracy for mediocrity that lives in human beings. And it's having another let's do lunch in your life is not productive because it clogs up the space of creation because you have all
Right.
these little incomplete things. Somebody says, let's do lunch to me. I say, great. When? Get your calendar out. Let's pick a date. I don't do let's do lunches. I don't do let's do dinners. I don't do oh, you should be on my podcast. Oh, okay. When? Here's my link, book it now. And I don't care if it's 5 months from now. It's in the calendar.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's something that I figured out, I guess, pretty recently. And I'll even call people out on that. I'm like, we always say this and we never do it. So like we need to pick a date now or it's
Yes.
not going to happen.
Exactly. And that's the now part, what you just said.
Right.
So when I say eliminating someday and living life now, even if you're scheduling it now for 2 weeks from now,
Right.
it's happening now.
It's still happening now. Yeah, I love that. Well, Jocelyn, tell people where they can find out more about you. And we've mentioned some of your programs already, but maybe run down what you have available and where people can find you.
Absolutely. Well, the best place to find me is my website, which is beunmessablewith.com.
Yeah.
And that has everything. So there's a freebie page, there's a how to work with me page, there's, all sorts of videos and all sorts of stuff like that. You can follow me on Instagram at beunmessablewith, and the podcast is called Be Unmessable With. So you can find that on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. So it's all around the Be Unmessable With brand, but the website has access to everything. And that's where you can get a lot of those free things to get started in this process and have a no risk way of tasting what this is and seeing if it's something that resonates.
Yeah. And I would say, as you're listening to this, listeners, go do that now. Do it today.
I love it. Yes.
Because
now, as you're listening.
Yeah, I've done this. I've done that. I've listened to something. It's like, I need to get back to that, that website or whatever. And then it just slips your mind. It never happens. So
exactly. I do that too. So that's why I always sign up for the mailing list on anything that I actually want to find out about, because I can always get out of the mailing, but at least then I'm getting a weekly dose of whatever that person's.
Yeah. But what I'll do now, I listen to podcasts mostly when I'm walking. So I'll tell Siri, take a note. And so I'll have a note to come back to for that. So, and that note will be there until I actually take action on it. So
that's good.
That's another way of kind of like doing it now, getting it, written down somewhere.
Yeah, Jocelyn's, I don't have Apple phone, so I don't have Siri, but I email myself. That's what I do, or text myself.
Yeah,
I have a thought like that, just so that it's like, okay, it's in existence.
Yeah, exactly. Jocelyn, great to see you. Good to see you again. I've been on your podcast as well.
Yes.
So, have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Hey there, if you liked this episode, come on over and talk about it. Let me know what you liked. If you didn't like this episode, come on over and talk about it. Let me know what you didn't like. Go to grieftogrowth.com/community and look for Talk About the Podcast. I'll see you there.